picture now? Well, probably not. Because what does any of that actually mean? So let's deconstruct this just a little bit to at least make some sense out of this. And starting with programming language itself, a programming language is basically just a tool that allows us to write code that will instruct a computer to do something. And of course, that's our main goal of using JavaScript, right? Then I go on and say that JavaScript is a high-level language, which means that we don't have to think about a lot of complex stuff, such as managing the computer's memory while it runs our program. So in JavaScript, there are a lot of so-called abstractions over all these small details that we don't want to worry about. And this makes the language a lot easier to write and to learn. Next, I say that JavaScript is object-oriented. And all that means is that the language is mostly based on the concept of objects for storing most kinds of data. And of course, we will learn all about object-oriented programming throughout this course. Finally, JavaScript is also a multi-paradigm language, meaning that it's so flexible and versatile that we can use all kinds of different programming styles, such as imperative and declarative programming. And these different styles are just different ways of structuring our code, basically. Again, you will learn all about this throughout the course. This is just the first very high-level overview, but I hope it's been making sense so far. Anyway, now that we know what JavaScript actually is, at least kind of, what is the role that it plays in web development? Or in other words, what do we actually use it for? And to answer that question, let's actually look at the three core technologies of the web: HTML, CSS, and of course, JavaScript. So these three technologies all work together to create beautiful, interactive, and dynamic websites or web applications. Now, the HTML is responsible for the content of the page. So the text, the images, the buttons, and all the content that you see on a web page is always written in HTML. Then the CSS is responsible for the presentation of that content. So basically for styling and for laying out the elements on a web page. And then finally, JavaScript is the real programming language of the internet. And it allows developers to add dynamic and interactive effects to any web page. We also use it to manipulate the content or the CSS, load data from remote servers, and really build entire applications in the browser, which we then call web applications. Now we can also use the analogy of nouns, adjectives, and verbs to make this separation of roles a bit easier to understand. So in this analogy, HTML represents the nouns, for example, saying that the P element is a paragraph. And so paragraph is the noun here. The CSS then is the adjective because it describes the noun. Like this piece of CSS saying the paragraph text is red. And so here red is the adjective describing the noun. And finally, JavaScript is of course the verb, like saying hide the paragraph. And so here we are doing something. And so we have a verb. Okay? Does that make sense?